From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Car Night Show starring Nolan. Why don't you join Nolan and his guest this week, Frank Carpano, to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're from Rhode Island, such as myself, Southern New England, you know my guest's face. You know who this person is. He's been with NBC 10 for the last 40 years. This is a big accomplishment for myself to be able to have this person on the show. It means a big deal, especially with how interested and how fast he was with communicating with me. That's a big deal. He's the one and only Frank Carpano. Frank, how are you doing today?
Good, Nolan. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm just trying to get along, as I'm sure you're trying to do with this whole thing we're going through, but hopefully it ends soon.
I'm with you on that. Fingers crossed.
Which I like, which is what I want to talk about briefly. I'm not going to spend the whole time talking about it, but obviously this is getting on close to 2 years, and everyone's been affected, every field, and especially NBC 10, who it seems as though, I'm sure behind the scenes there was stuff that they had to maneuver around, change, but it seems as though they've not really missed the beat necessarily, besides social distancing. So for you specifically, how's it been adjusting to this after so many years of not having to do something like this where it's Zoom for everything?
Well, it's been quite an adjustment. When this all broke, I was in New York. I was covering the Big East tournament and the Atlantic 10 basketball tournament, and then all of a sudden everything started to close down, and we were on the street in Manhattan to do a live shot back to the station, and I'm looking at people with masks on. I'm going, that it's a little over the top.
Yeah.
A little bit. I know that we would be wearing them ourselves not too long after that. But it's during that period where there really weren't any sports. There was sports news to talk about, just no games to talk about. I remember the big story through a couple of months was, what's Tom Brady going to do? Is he going to leave the Patriots? Where is he going to go? So that kind of sustained us for a little while, but it was just weird not having any games. And there was really very, very few people who were inside the station. A lot of people were working remotely. So there was that. And you like having the interaction at work. You like being able to talk with people about exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And there was really none of that. So it was what I would describe as almost like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Every day come in and pretty much do the same thing. And I'm used to being out and covering games. And it varies, 50% of the time here, 50% of the time out. It depends on the season and all that. But I just found it very different to just sit in here all the time producing a sports report. So it was different, but it certainly made you appreciate what we have when we have it, and that is the games. So when they started to come back, it was really quite a relief to go to games even without any fans, just to be able to see competition in person. And now as we get back to normal, and all of a sudden we've got another variant that's coming through on the COVID front, and you wonder where we're going. Are we going back? Just today, URI canceled its game against Brown later this week.
Yeah.
They had canceled their game in Washington on Sunday against College of Charleston. So, it's, you kind of keeping your fingers crossed, and you hope that, that's the extent of it, that, you don't lose many more games. The Bruins are shut down till after Christmas. The Celtics have players who have had to deal with COVID. The Patriots have guys who are on the COVID list. So, it's just one more thing you got to keep an eye out for, and you kind of keep your fingers crossed that they don't shut down everything again. And I think that would be really bad if it happened.
I had some of the other people who I've had on, we've had this conversation with them, and how I always ask, how they got involved, and everyone wants to know how people got involved in their specific field. And usually a lot of the times, whether it's an athlete or some, in your case, it's, ever since I was 6 years old, I knew this and I've always been involved. But for you, what was the relationship like with you and sports journalism or sports media at the time when you were growing up in the Carpano household?
Well, I was born in New York City area, and then we moved to Massachusetts back, when the Red Sox had their impossible dream run, and then Bobby Orr came on the scene, and that really kind of lit a fire for me on my love of sports. And it's kind of continued on since then. Yeah, I'd really tried a little bit of everything. In terms of, I did radio before I did television, which isn't typically the path that a lot of people who are getting into the business today take. And that gave me great experience in terms of, I was a DJ, I did news, I did commercials, and I did sports. So that was really my first love, and I was lucky enough to be able to to follow that path. And then really in high school, and I'd be interested to hear what you've heard from other people who were in the business, whether they knew that early that that's what they wanted to do. But I did know in high school that that's what I wanted to do, and I was able to get some experience in it. Not while I was in high school, then when I was in college, I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York and studied communications there, and also worked at a local cable station. And then when I got out, I started in radio, and within a year, I had a job in television in Worcester, Massachusetts. And then eventually I ended up here part-time and then full-time about a year after that. So there was a time that I had basically 3 jobs, and I was working a good 6.5 days a week. But, you do what you have to do to get to where you want to go. And
yeah,
that was my story. That was my experience. And, I think it's worked out pretty well. I've been very, very fortunate to have the career that I have.
Speaking of the radio, when you were in high school, and there's an interview or a podcast interview you had done probably a year ago, wherever it was, where you had mentioned that and how it was, you were doing it once a week, and then it became every day and that sort of thing. For you, how much did that set you on the fast pace to the type of scenario you ended up going into?
Well, the great thing about it that I always talk about, and again, people who are getting in the business now typically do not have this type of experience. It was great because all I had to worry about was how I was delivering. Writing was key. That is the one constant through all of this. So I was writing a lot of news and sports stories, and I was delivering them on the radio, and all I had to worry about was how I sounded. And obviously, the writing was very important. And then all of a sudden you add the TV component. Now you think about how you look, and you don't have to worry so much about how you sound because, hopefully you've come along in that way via your radio experience. So, there's a lot of kids who are coming out of college now with great experience that, are ready to jump into a job at a professional station and are, I think, in many ways better prepared to get into the TV business. So, I really thought that my radio experience back then was really valuable as the foundation to what ultimately became a job in television.
For you, how important was that? I want to say, I guess, the first moments when you're working for the first not radio station, but television station you're a part of. Those first few moments, were those still moments that you carry today in the sense of, how to operate and, how to properly deliver stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the first few years of, well, not even the first few years of my television career, but, once I decided what I wanted to do, and I would watch the sportscasters in Boston, because that's the area that I grew up in. And, you look and you go, okay, what makes this guy good? And, you try and take little pieces of different people and you incorporate it into your own style. You don't try and imitate anybody, but you go, I say, I like what he does, and maybe I wouldn't do what he does. And then you kind of form your own persona on the air. And so that's, kind of how I got into it. And in terms of how you feel when you're always, a little bit nervous, which is always good. Keeps you on your toes. And that continues to this day. I think really the key, though, to dealing with any type of pressure is just being prepared. Whether, you're getting ready to go on television or to go into a final exam in college, when you walk into that classroom or you walk into that TV studio, if you feel like you're well prepared, you're going to feel a lot more at ease than if you didn't prepare for that exam or if you didn't prepare for that sportscast. So I think, the key is preparation, and that's important.
Whether it was before coming to NBC or the first few years here at NBC, how I don't want to say difficult because I've sort of said that a lot, but for you to make sure people trust you as a credible person to share the story, how much was that for you to do, especially when you're around people at the station that have had more years of experience?
Um, I think the key is just getting out there and letting people get to know you through your storytelling, and also by doing different charity work. I think that that's important. Once people get to know you and know who you are and what you are, through the work that you do on television, and even if they have a chance to meet you, I think that that's how you are able to establish your credibility.
Now, which would like to hopefully get to later near the end, but something I want to talk about, it's clear, and I think everyone who watches NBC 10, such as people in my household, NBC in this business, in your business, people move around all the time, moving to different stations. Sometimes they spend a few years, whatever it may be. But at NBC 10, it seems as though there's a lot of people who have been there for a while, and they're trusted, obviously, because that's how I take it away. But for you, saying this, not only yourself being there for many years, but others, does that speak to the credibility of everyone there, or as well as the trust that NBC 10 puts into their employees?
Well, there's a lot that goes into it, and everybody has a different reason for staying as long as they do. I like to think of it as, this place is a great work-life balance. And I've had an opportunity to cover so many different things. I always had a dream of working in the top markets. The top market in our television business is New York City. And I had an opportunity to go down and to freelance at the NBC station in New York City for a couple of years. And I realized it's basically the same thing that I'm doing here. Only it's a bigger market. I think I grew to have an appreciation for what I have here, because working in New York City, as great as it is, does have its challenges. Not that this doesn't, but it's a different type of challenge. And then, for the past, 20 plus years, you think of what we've had a chance to cover here in New England sports. How many Super Bowls have I been to? World Series, NBA final, Stanley Cup final, Olympics, it's NCAA, tournament games. It's just, I'm blessed to have had those opportunities. And I dare say that others in a comparably sized market may not have had, probably haven't had that type of an experience. So I think all of that adds up to the reason why I've been here as long as I have.
Does that, speaking of covering those, all those events, those high, I'm sure gratifying moments, Olympics or World Series or so on and so forth, does that give you sort of validation to all the work that you put in each and every day and every year when you get to be able to do those things?
What do you mean by validation?
And sense of like you put in all this hard work, all the hours, all the extra time that you're putting into it to then be able to cover these sort of things, Olympic torch twice.
Yep. Well, it's a great opportunity, and I know that when I come back from these things, a Super Bowl or an Olympics or whatever, and usually people who aren't aware of how we work say, "Hey, do you have fun?" I'm like, "We have fun." It's crazy. I mean, when I first started going to Super Bowls, we had a 6 and 11 o'clock news at night, and that's what we prepared for. Now we have a 5, a 5:30, a 6, a 7, a 10, and 11. And then, we always prepare stuff for the next morning. So, you want to make sure that the station and the company gets their money's worth out of you, that, they're spending a lot of money to send you to these big events. And you want to make sure that, you get everything out of it that you want to get out of it in terms of coverage. So, it's a great reward. You're covering stories that really the eyes of the world are on. Everybody watches the Olympics. Everybody watches the Super Bowl. So, the fact that you're there covering that event is a big deal. And again, I'll say it again, I'm just blessed to have had the opportunities.
Is there one of those that, you hold near the top of that list that you are able to cover in that sort of situation?
Well, I think they're all great. However, I think that the the World Series in 2004 when the Red Sox ended their streak of futility in the World Series, 86 years without a World Series title. That has to be one of the top things, if not the top thing that I had a chance to cover, because I grew up a Red Sox fan. And even though you cover these things as a journalist and you're not covering it as a fan, you're covering it as a reporter. It was just amazing to be there in St. Louis when the Red Sox won the World Series, and to be there with thousands of Red Sox fans who were able to get a ticket and be in that game, and to watch how the players celebrated that championship out on the field. There were a lot of tears that were shed, and it was just an amazing opportunity. We, to go into the crowd and to speak to people who were there and to ask them what the experience was like for them was unbelievable. There was a gentleman who was there with his son, his son appeared to be about 30 years old. And he said, with apologies to all of my loved ones, to be here with my son for this moment, we're both Red Sox fans, is really, the greatest moment of my life. There was another guy who I had told the photographer, get some shots of people in the stands. And so he did. And so once the celebration was over, I ended up pulling an all-nighter because they wanted me on the morning show. And so I said to the photographer, listen, go sit in the car. I'm in a satellite truck. I said, I'm going to log all the footage and get everything ready for the morning. You just get some rest. Okay, so I'm looking through this footage. And all of a sudden, I see the scene that he caught from the stands. And so he's got a shot of a guy, an older guy who was wearing a Red Sox jersey. And I don't think the guy realized that my photographer was focusing on him. And as the photographer started to zoom in a little bit, this guy puts his finger up the air and looks and mouths the words, "For you, Dad." Now, I still get chills when I tell that story, because that guy's dad probably wasn't with us anymore. And maybe as a kid, he went to more Red Sox games with his dad than he did with anybody else. And here he was, apparently alone in the stands, sharing the moment with his father, who's no longer with us. Yeah. I'm sure there were loads of stories like that coming out of that stadium, and also coming out of that night from people who watched on TV. I remember hearing stories after that of people who, went to cemeteries and put the newspaper from the next day that said the Red Sox end their 86-year drought and win the World Series, and put that paper at the gravestone of their loved ones who were probably Red Sox fans. It had that much of an impact on people in this area when they won their first World Series. So that, I would have to say, Nolan, is probably tops on my list.
I think when I had Ken Bell on, he had mentioned the same thing, how magical that was. I don't remember it. I was very young, and watching sports at the time was, I'm sure, low on my mind. Now when we had scheduled this and when we had communicated setting this up, I told my dad, who you've covered many times, Andy Carr, for his team. And he was chomping at the bit to give me stuff to ask and questions and saying this and that. But there was one that I had to write down and ask, because it was the most interesting out of those. And this isn't exactly how I said, but it was basically, now since there's yourself and Joe Kayada as the two sports guys, and there's two weather guys, Mark and Anthony, RJ as well. But if you had to pick out of the two of them, Mark or Anthony, to play 2-on-2 with against Joe, who would you pick, and why do you think you would win with them?
So you're asking who would I want to team up with?
Yeah, so either Mark Searles or Anthony Macari versus Joe Kayada and whoever the other person is that you'd pick.
That I don't pick.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have three pretty athletic guys there. But oh boy, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'd probably I don't know. Actually, I don't know how athletic Anthony is, but I know that Mark is fairly athletic. So I'd go with Mark.
And is that because you just don't know what you'd be getting into with Anthony's athletic ability? That's why you think you'd win?
Yeah. Because Anthony, I love Anthony. Everybody loves Anthony. But I think, to answer your question, I would probably team up with Mark.
Now, I want to end, before the quick one word challenge, I'll let you get on your way. I had mentioned the torch running, and that to me, I've heard of that, and what that was like, or briefly or somewhat, but that task, not even to just do it one time, is a pretty important task, which a lot of important people, Muhammad Ali carried it, and other big time people have carried. So for someone like yourself, that must have been a pretty big thing. If you can briefly walk me through how you came about to be able to do that.
So the Olympics are on NBC. And so that is, that's why they were the sponsor of the torch run. So in every TV market that was on the torch run route, the station would pick one person from that NBC station to be a part of the torch run. The other people who got to do the torch run, I'm not sure how they were selected, and I don't believe that the station had anything to do with it. Well, maybe they did. There were other people who were, important in the community. So they came to me and they said, "We'd like you to be our representative at the torch run." And I did it prior to the Atlanta Olympics in '96, and I did it again prior to the Salt Lake City Olympics in 2002. Right? Yes. No, was it 2002?
04?
Yeah. 04. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it was a great thing, and it very well put together. They send you a uniform, and we gather together the people who are on this portion of the route, and they give you a number. They tell you, where you're going to be stepping out. You already know where you're going to be stepping out because that's where my family was. And you hop on a bus, and then all of a sudden you get to your spot, and there's people there cheering, and all of a sudden you have your torch, and a guy comes along in a motorcycle, and he lights it up for you. And then a couple of minutes later, the person before you comes up, and then you touch torches, and yours, actually, he turns mine on, the motorcycle guy, and then you touch torches, and that lights it up, and you run the distance that you're going to run, and the next person is there, and then you give the flame to them, and then another motorcycle guy comes along, he turns yours off, and that's it. And then you're kind of left with a great experience. So, and that's the way it went both times. Both of them summer. Were they both summer? One summer, one winter. Atlanta was summer, and Salt Lake City was winter. So it was very cool. I mean,
sure.
how many people get to do that? Not only once but twice. So
not many.
I know. I have both of those torches are sitting in my office at home and mounted on a beautiful display that I purchased after the fact. So it was a great experience.
So how close is that? How close is that to the 2004 World Series covering that? Then is it close, or is one just better than the other?
Yeah, I think the World Series. Because as much as the torch thing meant to me and to my family, the Red Sox was a great story, and really that in my business, that's what you root for. You don't root for a certain team to win. You root for a good story. And that was just a great story. And one that was, they came so close in 2003 before losing to the Yankees on Aaron Boone's home run in the playoffs. And then to make it this time, especially beating the Yankees in the ALCS and advancing to the World Series. It was just the World Series that would stand above the rest.
Now, before I let my wonderful, amazing guest, Frank Carpano, leave, I want to do a little segment I like to call the One Word Challenge. So for those who don't know what it is a segment where I, do my best to come up with a list of 5 or 6 topics that have some sort of relation to Frank. And what he has to do is come up with a word or two that best comes to his mind when he hears it. So are you ready?
Yes, sir.
The Dunkin' Donuts Center.
My home away from home.
NBC 10.
My second family.
Vinny Paz.
Vinny Paz. You want one word, huh? He's a character.
Sports media.
A lot of great people.
And last but certainly not least, Frank Carpano.
Luckiest guy going.
Well, Frank, as I said before we got going here, thank you so much to be able to do this for someone like yourself who's busy and certainly doesn't have to do this. It means a great deal. So thank you very much.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And what's your future? Are you this podcast? You going to get into a different part of the business, or?
Well, I'm at URI my senior year, and I have just finished my first semester of that year. So then I have an internship and after switching around countless times to when I found sports media, and I like it. I like the aspect of learning about sports and all that fun jazz. I would like to hope maybe do something with this. Who knows what happens with it? Although it takes many years and lots of inflow of funds to be able to do it big time, but we'll see what happens. I worked for the town of South Kingstown for the last 6 or 7 years in the Parks and Rec department, so I'm sort of leaning in that direction. But who knows? Who knows what happens?
Well, hey, listen, keep up the good work. If I can help you in any way, just let me know, and please tell your dad I said hi.
I appreciate it. And for all those out there who want news and updates regarding the podcast, follow on Instagram, Nolan Carr at Night, on Twitter, Nolan Carr Night, and subscribe, like, share, comment, and follow, because before Frank leaves to work on, preparing for the show, he really wants you to do that as well, because it helps the growth. Because 10 years from now, when this blows up and you look back and say, hey, this episode with Frank Carpano, this is amazing stuff.
I can say I knew you when.
Yes. In the words of Johnny Carson, I bid you a heartfelt good night until we see each other again.